We picture them as brutish cave dwellers, thick brows, heavy clubs, primitive grunts. But Neanderthals had complex societies, art, even jewelry. They survived ice ages that would kill us in weeks. So what could make these hardened survivors more terrified than facing down cave lions or mammoth herds? Beautiful women. Not their own women, outsider women. Women who looked different, spoke different, carried different genes. The fear was so deep, it shaped 40,000 years of survival strategy and maybe even killed them off. If you value documented prehistoric and human evolution history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from paleoanthropology studies and ancient DNA analysis. Now back to the story. Shanidar Cave, northern Iraq, 50,000 years ago. The bones tell a story archaeologists missed for decades. Neanderthal remains scattered across multiple layers. But here's what changed everything. Mixed remains. Neanderthal and early modern human, not from battle, from cohabitation. The isotope signatures prove they shared the same food sources, lived in the same spaces, raised children together. Yet most sites show complete separation. Why would some groups mix while others kept rigid boundaries? The answer sits in their DNA. Modern humans who left Africa carried genetic advantages, better immune systems, more efficient metabolism, stronger resistance to cold. When Neanderthal men encountered these outsider women, they faced an impossible choice: mate with them and produce hybrid children who might survive better, or maintain genetic purity and watch their bloodlines weaken generation by generation. The Levantine Corridor, 60,000 years ago. Modern humans pushed out of Africa for the second time. The first wave died out. This group carried something different: genetic mutations that allowed better processing of animal fats, improved cold tolerance, enhanced cognitive flexibility. They moved through the Middle East like a slow tide, one valley at a time. Kafze Cave, Israel, 92,000 years ago. Early modern human burials with red ochre grave goods. But the dates create a puzzle. Neanderthals occupied nearby Kabara Cave at the same time period. Two human species sharing the same landscape for 30,000 years. No evidence of warfare, no evidence of competition, just parallel existence until something changed. Spy Cave, Belgium, 38,000 years ago. 3 Neanderthal skeletons buried with modern human tools. Stone blades too thin for Neanderthal techniques. Ornamental shells carried from coastlines 200 kilometers away. The burial positions match modern human traditions, not Neanderthal customs. These weren't conquered people. They chose integration. They chose the outsiders. But integration came with a price that terrified most Neanderthal groups. The hybrid children looked different, taller, thinner, with smaller brow ridges. Their voices carried higher pitches. Their gestures followed unfamiliar patterns. Within 3 generations, the original Neanderthal features started disappearing entirely. It wasn't conquest, it was genetic erasure through attraction. Mezmaiskaya Cave, northern Caucasus, 45,000 years ago. A Neanderthal infant buried with modern human beadwork. The burial date overlaps with the earliest modern human sites in the region. But here's the crucial detail. The beads match patterns found at Ust-Ishim in Siberia, 4,000 kilometers away. Someone carried that design across continents. The trade networks were already mixing. El Sidran Cave, Spain, 43,000 years ago. 12 Neanderthals killed and processed for meat. But the cut marks tell a specific story. Only the adults show butchery damage. The children were spared, their bones carefully arranged. Analysis of their DNA reveals mixed ancestry. Someone was selecting which genetics survived. The hybrid children lived, the pure Neanderthals died. The pattern repeats across Europe. Wherever modern human women appeared, Neanderthal populations faced the same choice. Mezmaiskaya Cave in the Caucasus shows hybrid remains buried with both tool traditions. Oklatnikov Cave in Siberia reveals jewelry styles that blend both cultures. Vindija Cave in Croatia contains bones with intermediate features spanning 4,000 years of gradual change. Arcy-sur-Cure, France, 45,000 years ago. Neanderthals created the Châtel-Perronian tool tradition, advanced blade technology that rivals anything modern humans produced. Personal ornaments, symbolic art. They were adapting, learning, evolving their culture at unprecedented speed. But only at sites where modern human contact occurred first. The learning wasn't random. Stable isotope analysis shows Neanderthal women traveled between groups more often than men. They carried technologies, languages, and genetics across territorial boundaries. When modern human women entered this network, they accelerated cultural transmission by 300%. Information moved faster than ever before. If you value documented prehistoric and human evolution history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from nature genetics and paleoanthropology studies. Now back to the story. The fear wasn't irrational. Modern humans bred faster, adapted quicker, and survived harsh winters that killed pure Neanderthal populations. Their women carried genes for higher cognitive processing and more efficient fat storage. When they entered Neanderthal territory, they didn't need weapons. They just needed to exist. Within 10 generations, any group that intermingled would look, sound, and think like modern humans. Manat Cave, Israel, 55,000 years ago. A modern human skull fragment with unusual features, thick brow ridges, heavy jaw structure, dental patterns that match Neanderthal populations. The dating proves this individual lived during the second wave out of Africa. But they already carried Neanderthal genes. The mixing started earlier than anyone suspected. The isotope signatures from Manat Cave reveal something more disturbing. This individual consumed marine resources despite living 40 kilometers inland. Someone was trading seafood across mountain ranges. Complex economic networks existed between the groups. They weren't isolated populations, meeting by accident. They were connected trading partners for thousands of years. Abric Romani, Spain, 40,000 years ago. A Neanderthal settlement abandoned overnight. Tools left mid-use. Fires still containing charcoal. No signs of violence or natural disaster. But pollen analysis reveals modern human camps established just 15 kilometers north. The Neanderthals ran. They abandoned established hunting grounds, cached tool supplies, and seasonal shelters rather than risk contact with the newcomers. Why run from trading partners? The answer sits in their reproductive rates. Neanderthal populations remained stable at roughly 5,000 individuals across all of Europe. Modern human groups doubled every 2,000 years. Even with identical survival rates, the mathematical outcome was inevitable. Absorption through demographics. Some groups fought back through isolation. Gorham's Cave, Gibraltar, 28,000 years ago. The last Neanderthal populations built barriers, stone walls across cave entrances, defensive positions on cliff tops, tool caches hidden in secondary caves. They weren't just hiding, they were preparing for siege conditions. The radiocarbon dates prove they survived in isolation for nearly 10,000 years, longer than any other known group. But isolation meant genetic bottlenecking, inbreeding, weakened immune systems, the Gorham's Cave. Neanderthals showed bone deformities consistent with generational inbreeding, stunted growth, dental crowding, shortened lifespans. They chose genetic purity over survival and paid the evolutionary price. The defensive strategies varied by region. Cueva del Boquete de Zafaraya, southern Spain. 27,000 years ago, Neanderthals modified their traditional tool making to create weapons specifically designed against modern human hunting techniques. Heavier spear points, reinforced hafting. Counter-adaptations that suggest active military planning. La Faracie, France, 40,000 years ago, 7 Neanderthal burials arranged in family groups, but DNA analysis reveals something impossible. The children share maternal lineages with modern human populations from North Africa. The fathers remained genetically Neanderthal. Somehow, modern human women had joined the group voluntarily. They brought their genetics, but adapted to Neanderthal culture. This created the most feared scenario. Outsider women who looked beautiful but carried the genetic tools to replace entire bloodlines within decades. Their children inherited modern human advantages wrapped in familiar Neanderthal social structures. The perfect infiltration strategy without any conscious intention. The infiltration worked through marriage networks that spanned continents. Strontium isotope analysis from teeth proves individual women traveled over 1,000 kilometers from their birth locations. They carried genes from populations that had never directly contacted each other. Each marriage created genetic combinations that increased hybrid survival rates exponentially. Riparo Mezzana, Italy, 35,000 years ago, a mass burial containing 14 individuals, 6 pure Neanderthals, 8 hybrids showing progressive modern human features. The bone chemistry proves they died simultaneously, probably from disease, but the hybrid individuals show evidence of immune system activation. They fought off the illness longer. Their genes provided better resistance. The pure Neanderthals died first. Disease resistance became the ultimate weapon. Modern humans carried pathogens that didn't affect them but devastated Neanderthal immune systems. When their women integrated into Neanderthal groups, they brought invisible biological warfare. The hybrid children survived epidemics that killed their Neanderthal relatives. The pathogen loads were massive. Coprolite analysis from modern human sites shows parasite species unknown in Neanderthal remains. Tuberculosis markers appear in modern human bones, but not Neanderthal skeletons until after contact. Dental enamel defects indicate childhood diseases that struck Neanderthal populations in waves corresponding to modern human territorial expansion. Peștera, Q. Oase, Romania. 37,000 years ago. The oldest modern human remains in Europe, but they carry significant Neanderthal DNA, not from ancient admixture, from recent breeding. The isotope analysis proves this individual lived entirely on European resources, spoke European languages, followed European seasonal patterns, a hybrid who chose modern human identity but carried Neanderthal genetics forward. The Oase individual represents something unprecedented. 6% Neanderthal DNA from ancestors who lived only 4 generations earlier. This wasn't gradual mixing over millennia. This was intensive hybridization happening in real time. The beautiful outsiders weren't just attractive, they were actively selecting Neanderthal partners for genetic benefits. Kostenki, Russia, 36,000 years ago. Modern human settlements with mammoth bone architecture. But the tool assemblages include Neanderthal techniques that don't appear anywhere else in the modern human archaeological record. Someone was teaching modern humans specialized cold weather survival strategies. The technology transfer went both directions. The final twist comes from Denisova Cave, Siberia, 41,000 years ago. A single bone fragment from a teenage girl, her DNA reveals something unprecedented. Mother, Neanderthal. Father, Denisovan. This hybrid child represented 3 distinct human lineages combined in one individual. The ultimate outsider feared by everyone. But here's what the archaeological record really shows. Modern human DNA contains up to 4% Neanderthal genes. European populations carry markers from multiple Neanderthal lineages. Asian populations show Denisovan admixture. The beautiful outsiders didn't destroy Neanderthal genetics. They preserved them inside modern human bloodlines. The preservation was selective. Genes for immune function survived at higher rates than average. Cold adaptation genes persisted in northern European populations. Hair and skin color variants remained active. Pain tolerance markers stayed functional. The most advantageous Neanderthal traits became permanent parts of modern human biology. Cima de los Huesos, Spain, 400,000 years ago. Early Neanderthal ancestors who already showed the same patterns. Genetic isolation, territorial defense, resistance to outsiders. The behavioral strategies that ultimately killed them had been developing for nearly 500,000 years. They couldn't adapt fast enough when the pressure finally arrived. The fear was misplaced. Neanderthal men worried about genetic replacement, but the real threat was genetic absorption. Today, every person outside Africa carries Neanderthal DNA. Their tools influenced modern blade technology. Their art inspired cave painting traditions. Their medical knowledge provided herbal remedies still used today. The medical knowledge was extensive. Shanidar cave burials contain pollen from 8 different medicinal plants. Yarrow for pain relief, groundsel for inflammation, grape hyacinth for antiseptic properties. Modern pharmaceutical research confirms the effectiveness of these traditional remedies. The outsider women learned from Neanderthal healers and carried that knowledge into modern human populations. The last revelation comes from Vindija Cave, Croatia, 32,000 years ago. The final Neanderthal remains in southern Europe. But genetic analysis reveals something overlooked for decades. This individual carries genes for red hair, fair skin, and blue eyes, the exact combination that appears in modern European populations. The beautiful outsiders they feared looked exactly like them. The physical similarity wasn't coincidental. Both groups had adapted to European environments for thousands of years. Both carried mutations for light skin in low sunlight conditions. Both developed hair colors suited to northern latitudes. The fear response came from recognizing themselves in slightly modified form. The uncanny valley effect applied to entire populations. Recent analysis of Neanderthal artistic traditions shows symbolic thinking that rivals any modern human achievement. Cueva de Ardeles, Spain. 65,000 years ago. Cave paintings created before modern humans arrived in Europe. Geometric patterns, hand stencils, pigment preparation areas with organized toolkits. They were already artists, innovators, and abstract thinkers. The artistic traditions survived the transition. European cave art shows stylistic elements that first appear in Neanderthal sites, specific animal depictions, geometric border patterns, color preparation techniques. Modern human artists in Europe learned from Neanderthal teachers and incorporated their aesthetic principles into post-contact artistic traditions. But the hybridization process wasn't uniform across Europe. Genetic analysis reveals regional patterns that tell different stories. Western European populations show sporadic Neanderthal admixture concentrated in specific time windows. Eastern European remains demonstrate continuous mixing over 15,000 years. The beautiful outsiders adapted their integration strategies to local conditions. Bachokiro Cave, Dari Duis. Bulgaria, 46,000 years ago. Modern human remains, with Neanderthal tool traditions and Neanderthal DNA percentages higher than any other European site. 9% of their genome came from recent Neanderthal ancestors. This wasn't gradual population mixing. This was intensive interbreeding within family groups over multiple generations. The Bashokiro individuals carried genetic markers for enhanced immune function that don't appear in African modern human populations. They had acquired Neanderthal disease resistance through selective breeding. The outsider women weren't just integrating randomly, they were choosing partners whose genetics would improve their children's survival odds. Zlati Kun, Czech Republic, 45,000 years ago. A modern human woman with 3% Neanderthal DNA from ancestors who lived 70 generations earlier, but isotope analysis shows she consumed resources from both modern human and Neanderthal territorial ranges throughout her lifetime. She was traveling between communities, maintaining relationships with both groups simultaneously. The dual community strategy created genetic advantages that neither pure population possessed. Hybrid children inherited Neanderthal cold tolerance and modern human disease resistance. They could survive in territories that killed pure members of either parent group. The fear response intensified because the hybrids were demonstrably superior to pure populations in measurable ways. Grotte du Renne, France, 44,000 years ago. The Châtelperronian industry reaches peak sophistication. Neanderthals created personal ornaments that match modern human complexity: pierced shells, carved ivory pendants, pigment processing stations with organized color palettes. They were competing culturally with the newcomers and winning in specific technological areas, but competition required resources. Neanderthal populations invested increasing amounts of time in symbolic behavior as modern human contact intensified, time that should have gone toward hunting, tool maintenance, and childcare. The cultural arms race exhausted their survival capacity, even as it demonstrated their cognitive abilities. Krapina, Croatia, 130,000 years ago, early evidence of Neanderthal cannibalism during resource scarcity. Cut marks on bones indicate systematic processing of human remains during harsh winters. The practice continued sporadically until modern human contact, then disappeared entirely. The outsiders brought alternative survival strategies that made cannibalism unnecessary. The survival strategies were revolutionary. Modern humans introduced systematic food storage techniques that doubled caloric efficiency during winter months, smoking processes that preserved meat for 6 months instead of 6 weeks, plant processing methods that extracted nutrients from previously inedible vegetation. Neanderthal populations that adopted these techniques survived longer than groups that maintained traditional practices. Trouwmegriet, Belgium, 36,000 years ago. A Neanderthal woman buried with modern human jewelry and tools, but traditional Neanderthal burial orientation. The grave goods include shells from the Mediterranean coast, 500 kilometers away. Someone maintained long-distance trade relationships specifically to provide appropriate grave goods for this individual. The burial patterns reveal social integration that went beyond simple mating. Neanderthal individuals were being incorporated into modern human kinship networks with full ceremonial recognition. They weren't conquered or absorbed. They were adopted as family members with equal status and inheritance rights. Les Cotés, France, 42,000 years ago. Modern human occupation directly overlying Neanderthal deposits with no sterile layer between. The transition happened within decades, not centuries. Tool assemblages showed direct technological transfer from Neanderthal specialists to modern human apprentices. The learning relationships were formal and systematic. Apprenticeship created the most dangerous scenario for Neanderthal genetic survival. Young modern humans learned Neanderthal techniques while contributing their own innovations. Within one generation, they possessed superior versions of traditional Neanderthal technologies. The teachers became obsolete even as they trained their replacements. Whole Fels, Germany, 40,000 years ago, modern human figurines depicting of female forms with exaggerated sexual characteristics. But the ivory carving techniques matched Neanderthal traditions from earlier levels at the same site. Someone was using traditional methods to create art that celebrated the physical attributes that attracted Neanderthal partners. The artistic evidence suggests conscious awareness of the hybridization process. Modern human artists were documenting the physical traits that facilitated successful integration. They understood which characteristics attracted Neanderthal partners and emphasized those features in symbolic representations. Willendorf, Austria, 30,000 years ago. Venus figurines with red ochre staining and specific hairstyle patterns that match Neanderthal personal ornamentation traditions. The artistic style had evolved to incorporate hybrid aesthetic preferences. Modern human art was adapting to appeal to Neanderthal visual culture. La Côte de Saint. Brelade, Jersey. 40,000 years ago, massive mammoth bone accumulations created by driving herds over cliffs. The hunting technique appears in Neanderthal sites, but not in early modern human assemblages. Someone taught modern human groups specialized megafauna hunting strategies that required detailed knowledge of animal behavior and terrain. The knowledge transfer was bidirectional but unequal. Modern humans learned Neanderthal hunting techniques while introducing superior tool technologies. Neanderthals gained access to advanced weaponry while sharing territorial knowledge. The trades favored groups with larger populations who could afford to specialize in technology development. Surin Crimea, 32,000 years ago, the last Neanderthal stronghold in Eastern Europe. DNA analysis reveals genetic bottlenecking consistent with isolation, but also periodic injection of modern human genes. Small groups of outsider women continued joining isolated Neanderthal communities, even during the final millennia. Why would modern human women choose isolation with dying populations? The answer appears in their genetic profiles. These women carried rare alleles that were advantageous in specific environments, but detrimental in large populations. Joining small Neanderthal groups allowed their unique genetics to dominate the gene pool rather than disappearing through dilution. Cueva Anton, Spain, 37,000 years ago. Neanderthal use of marine shell ornaments with modern human perforation techniques. The shells originated from beaches controlled by modern human populations. Someone was trading raw materials that required crossing territorial boundaries regularly. The beautiful outsiders controlled access to resources that Neanderthal symbolic culture required. Resource control became the ultimate integration strategy. Modern human groups monopolized access to high-quality toolstone, marine shells for ornamentation, and pigments for body painting. Neanderthal populations that wanted these materials had to establish marriage relationships with modern human communities. The cultural requirements created genetic dependencies. Fumane Cave, Italy, 41,000 years ago. Neanderthal remains with dental modifications consistent with modern human food processing techniques. Someone was teaching Neanderthals to eat previously inedible plants through specialized preparation methods. The dietary expansions provided survival advantages during resource scarcity, but required constant contact with modern human knowledge keepers. The dietary changes were permanent. European Neanderthal populations in contact zones show isotopic signatures indicating 50% plant consumption versus 20% in isolated groups. The modern human women brought agricultural knowledge that fundamentally altered Neanderthal survival strategies. Groups that learned these techniques survived longer but became genetically dependent on their teachers. Gruta da Oliveira, Portugal, 31,000 years ago. Neanderthal tools created using modern human napping techniques but with traditional Neanderthal design preferences. The technology transfer was selective and intentional. Neanderthals were learning specific skills while maintaining cultural identity through design choices, but selective learning created technological dependence. Neanderthal groups that partially adopted modern human techniques could no longer manufacture traditional tools effectively. They required ongoing contact with modern human specialists to maintain their tool supplies. The beautiful outsiders became essential for basic survival activities. Moldova, Ukraine. 44,000 years ago, a mammoth bone-dwelling structure that combines Neanderthal architectural principles with modern human construction techniques. The hybrid design provided superior insulation and structural stability. Engineering knowledge was flowing between populations through marriage and kinship networks. The architectural innovations reveal planning timescales that exceeded individual lifespans. These structures required maintenance knowledge passed between generations. Modern human women who joined Neanderthal communities brought construction techniques, but also the social systems necessary to maintain complex infrastructure over centuries. Recent genetic studies of Neanderthal remains reveal something unexpected. Populations that survived longest show the highest percentages of modern human DNA. The groups that most successfully resisted integration died out earliest. The beautiful outsiders weren't destroying Neanderthal survival. They were enabling it through genetic enhancement. But genetic enhancement came with cultural costs. Hybrid populations developed languages that combined Neanderthal and modern human linguistic structures. Traditional Neanderthal oral traditions became incomprehensible to pure populations within 3 generations. Cultural knowledge was being lost even as survival capabilities improved. The linguistic evidence appears in modern human populations that occupied former Neanderthal territories. European languages contain substrate elements that don't appear in African or Asian language families. Phonological patterns, grammatical structures, vocabulary roots that suggest borrowing from extinct language traditions. The beautiful outsiders preserved fragments of Neanderthal culture even as they transformed it. Archaeological evidence from Abri Patau, France reveals the final phase. 28,000 years ago, modern human burials with grave goods that include traditional Neanderthal tool types no longer manufactured by any living population. Someone was maintaining obsolete technologies for ceremonial purposes. The beautiful outsiders had become keepers of vanishing traditions. The ceremonial maintenance suggests guilt or loss recognition. Modern human populations understood they were presiding over extinctions, even as they benefited from hybridization. The grave goods represent attempts to preserve genetic memory through material culture. They were mourning the very populations they had absorbed, but absorption wasn't complete. Recent analysis of European cave bear remains shows hunting patterns that match Neanderthal techniques persisting until 15,000 years ago. Traditional ecological knowledge survived in hybrid populations long after pure Neanderthal groups disappeared. The beautiful outsiders maintained specialized skills through cultural transmission. DNA analysis of present-day European populations reveals regional variation in Neanderthal ancestry that corresponds to archaeological contact zones. Populations descended from intensive contact areas carry different Neanderthal genetic markers than groups from peripheral regions. The beautiful outsiders created genetic landscapes that persist 40,000 years later. Cold wind through limestone, 40,000 years of terror. The outsiders were coming home,